Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Je suis désolé, je ne parle français pas. Of course, when I lived in England 14 years, they said I couldn't speak English either, so I will try to improvise. I appreciate the honor of sharing with you and updating the findings of an ambitious synthesis of American energy solutions done by 61 of us in 6 quarters, and now also published in French as Réinventer le feu. This is a business book, a design book with much interesting detail. And it began by asking, what if we could make energy do our work without working our undoing? Could we have fuel without fear? Could we reinvent fire? And we chose this big poetic title because long ago fire made us human, then fossil fuels made us modern. But now we need a new fire that makes us safe, secure, healthy, and durable. That has now become possible, and indeed it works better and costs less than what we are doing. So let's see how. Now, the American situation is a little different than in France, but in the world, 4/5 of the energy still comes from burning each year 20 cubic kilometers of the rotted remains of primeval swamp goo. Those fossil fuels have built our civilization, created our wealth, enriched the lives of billions of people. But their rising costs to our security, economy, health, and environment are eroding, if not actually outweighing their benefits. So we need a new fire. And switching from the old fire to the new fire means changing 2 big stories, oil and electricity, which each emit 2/5 of the fossil carbon into the air. Now, these stories are less than 1% connected in the United States, less than 5% in the world, but the uses are similarly concentrated. In the US, for example, 3/4 of the oil fuels transportation, 3/4 of the electricity powers buildings, and the rest of both runs factories. So very efficient transport and land use. Buildings and factories can save oil, and the coal that still makes 2/5 of US electricity, and the natural gas that can displace both of them. But today's energy system is not just inefficient, it is also disconnected, aging, dirty, and insecure, so it needs refurbishment. By 2050, though, it could become efficient, connected, and distributed with elegantly frugal autos, buildings, and factories, all relying on a secure, modern, and resilient electricity system. So the United States could eliminate its addiction to oil and coal by 2050 and also use 1/3 less natural gas while switching to 3-fold more efficient use and 3/4 renewable supplies. That is the transition I will summarize. And we found that by 2050, this could cost the United States $5 trillion less in net present value than business as usual, assuming that carbon emissions and all other hidden costs are worth 0, a conservatively low estimate. Yet this cheaper energy system could support a 2.6 times bigger economy, all without needing coal or oil or nuclear energy. And we showed that this transition would need no new inventions, and that getting the US completely off oil and coal and nuclear $5 trillion cheaper would need no act of Congress, but could be led by business for profit. Policy changes are needed, but they can be done administratively or at a subnational level, where we've long made most of our energy policy anyway. We have a less centralized system than in France. So this energy solution could use America's most effective institutions, private enterprise co-evolving with civil society, sped by military innovation, to go around our least effective institutions. And whether you care most about profits and jobs and competitive advantage, or national security, or environmental stewardship, climate and public health, reinventing fire makes sense and makes money. General Eisenhower reputedly said that expanding the boundaries of a tough problem makes it soluble by encompassing more options, more synergies, more degrees of freedom, everything the solution requires. So reinventing fire integrates all four energy-using sectors: transport, buildings, industry, and electricity. And it integrates four kinds of innovation, not just technology and public policy, but also design, the way technologies are combined, and business strategy. And these combinations yield much more than the sum of their parts and create deeply disruptive business opportunities. So let's start with technology. In automobiles, the biggest oil user, 2/3 of the fuel use of a typical car is caused by its weight. And removing weight leverages 7 times larger fuel savings at the tank. 15 years ago, my team designed a halved weight carbon fiber hybrid sports utility vehicle, 4 to 6 times more efficient with a 2-year payback. 8 years ago, Toyota showed such a concept car with the interior volume of a Prius, half the fuel use, and 1/3 the weight, just 420 kilograms. And now, 1 and 2 liter equivalent per 100 kilometer carbon fiber electrified cars are on the market from Volkswagen and from BMW, which confirmed that the carbon fiber is paid for by needing fewer batteries. An RMI spin-off company developed an even cheaper and faster manufacturing technology that made this carbon fiber carbon cap, sort of 1914 Italian style, in just 1 minute 8 years ago. You can tell from the sound it is extremely strong and stiff, and it's tougher than titanium. But now this process can be used to make complex 2x2 meter parts in 1 minute, and it's in the global supply chain from Germany. If we made all US autos in this way, we would save half an OPEC or 1.5 Saudi Arabias of oil by drilling in the Detroit Formation, a very prospective play. And the cost of saving a barrel would be $18 and falling. That just buys the electrification of the car. The ultralighting is approximately free, paid for by a 2/3 smaller propulsion system and by radically simpler automaking, needing 80% less capital. Now, ultralight electric vehicles can spread and their prices can drop even faster with a temporary fee-bate, that is, rebates for efficient new autos paid for by fees on inefficient ones. So it would be a revenue-neutral form of the French bonus-malus system, which in its first 2 years tripled the speed of improving the efficiency of French automobiles. The strongest fee-bate is now in Norway, and it raised the market share of electrified vehicles last year to 12.5%, 10 times the US level. The same physics and the same business logic also apply to big vehicles. The heavy trucks of Walmart use smarter designs and logistics to haul the same load using half the fuel of a decade ago. Just the technological fuel saving in those big lorries can rise to 2/3, and that plus the tripled to quintupled efficiency airplanes like these designs from Boeing and NASA and MIT can save the United States $0.9 trillion net present value. In both heavy and light vehicles, today's military revolution in energy efficiency will speed all these advances in the civilian sector, which uses over 50 times more oil. Much as military R&D gave us the internet, the global positioning system, the jet engine and microchip industries. And that leverage can speed the path off oil so we need not fight over oil. And then our warfighters can have neg missions in the Persian Gulf and the South China Sea. Mission unnecessary. They really like that idea. Now, autos are not just becoming 4 to 8 times more efficient, they're also being driven less, even in Europe and America, where gasoline use has been falling since 2007. Generations X and Y tend not to even to want to own a car because it's cheaper and easier not to. A young Londoner or Shanghainese on an evening out can combine many different modes using smartphone apps to bridge the once awkward gaps in the route by summoning ubiquitous transport services on demand. One San Franciscan reported this was saving her $11,000 per year compared to owning a car. And besides Uber and Lyft and public transit and walking and biking, she also used Getaround, a smartphone service for renting your neighbor's car when it is unneeded and parked, as U.S. cars are 95% of the time. Such IT and connectivity solutions create the sharing economy. As Tom Friedman recently said, the world's biggest media company, Facebook, owns no newspapers. The world's biggest hotelier, Airbnb, owns no beds. The world's biggest taxi service, Uber, owns no cars. They all just let you rent other people's underused assets. Seamlessly linking access options with needs makes you confident you will not need a car, but if you ever do, you don't need to own one. In some Chinese cities, renting a Kandi electric vehicle from this giant vending machine costs about $3 an hour. Also, renting shared cars when you need them can boost their utilization about 10 times, and then probably double it again with partly or fully autonomous vehicles, like this Mercedes-Benz concept car. Google plans to release self-driving cars in about 3 years. The biggest US company, Apple, is developing them also. They're already legal in 4 of the United States, and they are the theme of next year's Dutch presidency of the European Union. Autonomy makes electric vehicles' total cost per kilometer 2/5 lower than that of fueled vehicles because their 10 times lower energy cost per kilometer more than offsets their higher capital cost. So the mashup of mobility with information technology means radically fewer vehicles, all electric, driving fewer total kilometers. And shared electric vehicles providing mobility services could drive 1 million kilometers because carbon fiber does not dent or rust or fatigue. So autos are morphing from what we call PIGs, personal internal combustion, gasoline, steel-dominated vehicles, to SEALs, shareable, electrified, lightweight, autonomous service vehicles. And their business and marketing case is strong, and they will further speed the day when cars use no oil. Meanwhile, China's 3,000 kilometers of bus rapid transit, BRT, may quintuple in the next 5 years. This is a low-tech, high-design, retrofittable innovation. It transformed this street in Hangzhou into the street on the right, carrying 800,000 riders each day. Over 30 million commuters use BRT daily in nearly 200 cities worldwide. And it can achieve a metro, a subway-like route density at 5% the cost. It was invented by the architect mayor of Curitiba, Brazil, as a cheaper, faster, better alternative to cars because Curitiba had the highest or second highest car ownership in Brazil. But it was retrofitted throughout this Houston-sized city of 2 million people in just 4 years, losing only a few buildings and achieving Brazil's lowest car drivership and cleanest urban air. Now BRT and other non-car modes are also reshaping the America's worth of new cities that China plans for the next 15 years. Architect Peter Calthorpe is helping redesign Chongqing around 1.5 million pairs of feet, not cars, so driving will fall by 2/3. Each 13-lane super boulevard is replaced by a pair of one-lane, one-way streets. Between those pairs, a car-free BRT street, and between those, pedestrian and bicycle streets. So the shift from a superblock arterial vehicle network to a capillary web builds a human ecology with vibrant commerce, rich social interaction, 1/3 less concrete, equal or better throughput, cleaner air, and happier citizens. The 53 cities already adopting this design will use little oil. And even in the car-dominated United States, such new urbanist smart growth plus mobility IT integration and charging real-time driving costs per kilometer, not per liter, can give us the same or better access with 46 to 84% less driving at lower cost with higher developer profits. So in 35 years, a far more mobile U.S. economy can use no oil. Saving or displacing each barrel for just $25 rather than buying it for over $100 saves $4 trillion net present value. $12 trillion if we had counted just the hidden economic and military costs of U.S. oil dependence. So to phase out the oil, we can first get efficient and then switch fuels. And those 1 or 2 liter per 100 kilometer autos can use any mixture of hydrogen fuel cells in green, electricity in yellow, or advanced biofuels in orange. The heavy lorries and airplanes can realistically use advanced biofuels or hydrogen. The lorries could even burn natural gas, but no vehicles will need oil. And if we needed any biofuels, at most 3 million barrels a day, they could be made 2/3 from wastes without displacing cropland and without harming climate or soil. France could do much the same thing from crop wastes. Our team at RMI speeds these oil savings by institutional acupuncture, where the business logic is congested and not flowing properly. We insert little needles in selected points in partners like Ford and Walmart and the Pentagon to get that chi, that entrepreneurial juice flowing. And this long transition is already so well underway that 5 years ago, mainstream analysts were starting to see peak oil not in supply, but in demand. Because like whale oil in the 1850s, oil is becoming uncompetitive even at low prices before it becomes unavailable even at high prices. But electric vehicles need not add new burdens to the electricity system. Rather, when smart autos exchange electricity and information through smart buildings with smart grids, they are adding to the grid flexibility and distributed storage that help the grid to integrate varying solar and wind power. So electrified autos make the auto and electricity problems easier to solve together than separately. And they converge the oil story with our second big story, saving electricity, then making it differently. And those twin revolutions are already bringing more numerous, diverse, and profound disruptions than in any other sector, as 21st century technology and speed collide head-on with 20th and 19th century institutions, rules, and cultures. Electricity-saving techniques can evolve dramatically, as we know from, say, the history of lighting. Edison's incandescent lamps got 11 times more efficient over 130 years. Then new types of lamps slowly followed and improved. But then, like a thunderbolt, came white LEDs. Each decade, they became 30 times more efficient, 20 times brighter, 10 times cheaper. So they're rocking the $200 billion a year lighting market, and since lighting uses 1/7 of the world's electricity, they're disrupting the business model of electric utilities, which since 1892, overruling the better judgment of Thomas Edison, have sold electricity as a commodity, not as a service or an infrastructure, so that its more efficient use reduces their revenues rather than their costs. The steep slope of the LED efficiency curve is applying to more and more efficiency techniques. What else changes that fast? Well, try photovoltaics, which in physics terms are essentially LEDs inside out. U.S. electricity from various fossil fuels just got fatally disrupted, even just in the fuel cost shown here, by a sudden meteorite strike from PVs. And that's what a game changer looks like. The low aqua curve wind power is already highly competitive with traditional power stations and is causing nuclear plants to be shut down because many are now too costly to compete just on operating cost. Now, changing how we make electricity gets easier if we need less of it. Most of it today is wasted in both our countries, and efficiency techniques keep improving faster than we can install them. So the potential savings keep getting bigger and cheaper. The low-hanging fruit grows back faster than we can pick it. But as buildings and industries start to get efficient faster than they grow, America's electricity use, instead of growing 1% a year as officially forecast, could shrink 1% a year, even with the extra use by the electric cars. And that's already happening. Our electric use peaked in 2007. It's fallen in 5 of the past 7 years. It's fallen by as much as 3.4% per year, weather adjusted, per dollar of real GDP. That was in 2012. And we can keep demand dropping by reasonably accelerating existing trends. Specifically, over the next 40 years, U.S. buildings can triple or quadruple their energy productivity, saving $1.4 trillion net with a 33% internal rate of return. So the savings are worth 4 times their cost. Industry can also accelerate, doubling its energy productivity with a 21% internal rate of return. And to do all this by 2050, we would just need, over the next 15 years, to achieve nationally the level of efficiency adoption already achieved in our northwestern states 10 years ago. Now, a key to such big savings is a disruptive innovation we've developed in our little black swan hatchery and called integrative design. It often makes very big energy savings cost less than small or no savings, turning diminishing returns into expanding returns. So let's start with buildings, which use 3/4 of U.S. electricity and 1/3 of the directly used natural gas. Integrative design is how our retrofit 5 years ago is saving 2/5 of the energy in the Empire State Building, remanufacturing its 6,500 windows on site into super windows that let light through but block heat, plus some other improvements, cut the maximum cooling load by 1/3. Then we renovated smaller chillers instead of adding bigger ones, saving $17 million of capital costs that paid for most of the efficiency gains, and it cut the payback to just 3 years. Now, if we had counted the non-energy benefits that have greatly increased real estate and human performance, the actual payback to the owner would be well under 1 year. You might think that I would use a lot of gas to stay warm, or maybe electricity, because I live 2,200 meters up in the Rocky Mountains near Aspen, where temperatures have dropped as low as minus 44 Celsius. But my house does no combustion, that's so 20th century, and it has no heating system. Super insulation, ventilation, heat recovery, and super windows that insulate like 16 sheets of glass, but look like 2 and cost less than 3, make it 99% passive solar heated. And eliminating the heating system paid up front for the efficiency that displaced it, and it saved about 90% of my household electricity. The central atrium seen here in a February snowstorm has produced so far 58 passive solar banana crops. It doesn't have to look like this to work like this, but my house helped to inspire over 30,000 European passive buildings that also have no heating and roughly normal construction cost. And in another 5 years, all new buildings in the EU must use nearly zero electricity. This works from Colorado to Bangkok, but wherever you live, integrative design gives many benefits from each expenditure. The white arch you can see at the top of the upper middle picture has 12 functions, but only one cost. How fast is the state-of-the-art moving? Well, the 38% saving we did in the Empire State Building 5 years ago seemed pretty good, until 3 years later we saved 70% in this difficult, half-century-old federal office complex, making it more efficient than the best new U.S. office, which in turn is only half as efficient as our own new office, which we'll move into later this year. And it has no central heating or cooling equipment. Even in sweltering India, our partners likewise save about 80% of the energy, and it costs 10 or 20% less to build. Then the photovoltaics make the rest. In Holland, several private and public partners are collaborating on mass efficiency upgrades of ordinary apartments, so they will produce at least as much solar energy as they use. And by industrializing the retrofit process in the first 11,000 units, these innovators expect to show no need for subsidy. They would finance the retrofit out of the saved energy. Integrative design can also raise the $500 billion of conventional energy saving potential in U.S. industry. Dow Chemical, for example, invested $1 billion in efficiency and already has returned $9 billion. But there's more to do. For example, 3/5 of the world's electricity runs motors, half of that runs pumps and fans. Those things can all be much improved, as can the motor systems. But first we should capture bigger, cheaper savings normally ignored, not in any official forecast or study yet. For example, pumps, the biggest use of motors, move liquid through pipes. A typical industrial pumping loop, though, was redesigned to use at least 86% less pumping energy, not by getting better pumps and motors and controls, but just by replacing long, thin, crooked pipes with fat, short, straight pipes. That also shrinks the pumping equipment and its capital costs. This is not even a new technology. This is rearranging our metal furniture as designers. In my own house, it recently saved 97% of pumping energy in some new piping. So what does this mean for the electricity that is 3/5 used in motors? Well, from any fuel burned at the power plant to the end use, many successive losses compound, so only 1/10 of the energy in the fuel comes out the pipe as flow. But now turn those compounding losses around backwards and they become compounding savings from right to left. And every unit of flow or friction you save in the pipe save 10 units of fuel cost, pollution, global weirding at the power plant, and the components get smaller and the cost goes down. We have lately found such snowballing energy savings in over $40 million worth of diverse industrial redesigns in many sectors. Typically, our retrofits save about 30 to 60% of the energy with a 2 or 3 year payback, while in new designs, new facilities, savings are about 40 to 90% and the capital cost almost always goes down. We have found this, by the way, also in France. Now, as buildings and industry get efficient faster than they grow, electricity demand keeps falling in the US and much of Europe and Japan. And this helps renewables displace fueled and even nuclear electricity. Notice the logarithmic scale here showing the plummeting real cost of photovoltaic modules in blue and wind farms in green, driven largely by the gigantic Chinese market. China has produced in each of the past 3 years more wind power than nuclear power, in which it has the world's most aggressive program. And just in 2013, China added more photovoltaic capacity than my country has added since we invented it 61 years ago. In 20 of the United States, companies will install photovoltaics on your house's roof with no down payment, soon perhaps cash back, and beat your electric bill. Deutsche Bank says this will be profitable in 4/5 of the world in 2 more years. Bypassing power companies the way mobile phones bypassed wireline phone companies gives electricity executives nightmares and venture capitalists sweet dreams. Batteries also are getting rapidly cheaper, so more customers can choose and are choosing, say in Hawaii, to drop off the grid. So the old utility business models have no place to hide. That's why Barclays downgraded the whole U.S. utility sector, which now pays 200 or 300 basis points more for capital than solar installers do. Can fossil fuels really win this competition, where your new oil or gas well makes my next one cost more, but your next solar panel makes my next one cost less? Bloomberg thinks not, and projects that in the next 15 years, the fossil and nuclear plant growth will cut in half, not counting bigger retirements, while renewable growth doubles or triples. And the market evidence is in each of the past 4 years, modern renewables, not counting big hydro, have added over 80 gigawatts per year and got over $250 billion of annual investment. No wonder Germany's biggest utility, E.ON, is splitting in two to focus on the new opportunities and give the old ones they can't make money on back to the shareholders. GDF Suez and RWE have announced a similar shift of emphasis without the split. So it's really time to discuss whether electricity companies should ignore, deny, resist, diversify, hedge, transform, or decline. And that choice is especially urgent for Électricité de France, which had serious financial problems even before rescuing Areva. The cheaper renewable power gets, the more we buy, so the cheaper it gets, so the more we buy, and so on. And these modern renewables scale up in a completely different way. Instead of a cathedral-like giant power plant that takes years to license, design, and build, each year with about the same capital, we can build a factory that each year thereafter produces enough solar cells to generate each year thereafter the same electricity that the cathedral ultimately will. So solar output worldwide is scaling faster than cell phones. We're often told, though, that only coal and gas and nuclear stations can keep the lights on because they are 24/7, while wind power and photovoltaics are variable, so perhaps unreliable. But let me explain why neither statement is true. First, variable does not mean unpredictable. Here's how accurately the grid operator of France in one stormy winter month forecast a day ahead in blue what the country's wind farms would produce a day later in green. I'll bet they wish they could forecast demand that well. And then, of course, the reason we built the grid is that no generator is 24/7. They all break. And when a giant coal or nuclear plant breaks, 1 billion watts vanishes in milliseconds, often for weeks or months, often without warning. So grids routinely handle this intermittence by backing up failed plants with working plants. And in the same way, but often at lower cost, grids can handle the forecastable variations of solar and wind power by backing up variable renewables with other renewables of other kinds or in other places. Thus, highly reliable power can come from a portfolio of largely or wholly renewable sources when they're forecasted, integrated, and diversified by type and location. Let me illustrate this with a simulation from the state of Texas, which has an isolated grid not connected to the rest of the United States. Its expected 2050 summer electric loads can get much smaller and less peaky with efficient use. Then we can install enough wind power and photovoltaics to make 86% of the annual electricity and get the other 14% from dispatchable renewables you can have at any time, like geothermal, small hydro, solar thermal electric, feedlot biogas burned in existing gas turbines, burning municipal waste, burning obsolete energy studies. Now we have 100% renewable supply. It doesn't perfectly match the load. We have both surpluses and deficits. But we can match it to the load by putting the surplus electricity into two kinds of distributed storage: ice storage air conditioning and smart charging of electric autos, both fully deployed, and then recovering that energy when needed and filling the last gaps with unobtrusively flexible demand. Then only 5% of the annual renewable output is surplus, so the economics should be quite good. And this is not only a theory. Actually, some national grid operators already operate in this way. Germany last year was 27% renewably powered, Italy 33%, but 4 other European countries with modest or no hydropower already got about half their electric consumption from renewables. They added no bulk storage, but they got superior reliability. For Denmark and Germany, 10 times as good as the United States. So the operators have learned to run these grids the way a conductor leads a symphony orchestra. No instrument plays all the time, but the ensemble continuously produces beautiful music. And a key to this is also making power generation the right size for the job. The most advanced example is Denmark. Over 3 decades, they've shifted from centralized power plants, mainly burning coal, to distributed wind turbines, 86% locally owned, and cogeneration from agricultural wastes. Denmark is planning 100% renewable energy of all kinds by 2050 at essentially no extra cost. They're on track. And they're reorganizing their grid in a cellular way that makes cascading blackouts impossible. We need to do something like this in the United States, where however we rebuild our aging, dirty, insecure electricity system by 2050, it's going to cost about the same. But whether we do more of the same, or new nuclear and so-called clean coal, or centralized renewables or distributed renewables, we get profoundly different risks at the same costs. Risks around national security, fuel, water, finance, technology, climate, and health. It turns out the solution that best manages all of these risks and that makes big cascading blackouts impossible is to reorganize distributed renewables into microgrids that normally interconnect but can split apart fractally at need, stand alone and serve critical loads, and reconnect seamlessly. That is the Pentagon strategy for powering military bases. It's how my house works, and it costs about the same. So it gives us better national security, customer choice, entrepreneurial opportunity, and innovation. So to summarize the electricity story, together efficient use and diverse, distributed, renewable, resilient supply are starting to transform the sector. Utilities used to build giant coal and nuclear plants, a little gas, maybe efficiency and renewables, and we rewarded them, as you still do, as 34 of our states still do, for selling you more electricity. But now, especially where regulators instead reward cutting your bills, the market is going other way up. And that especially happens in the 30-odd United States, where demand-side resources are allowed to bid into the same auctions as supply and bid directly against supply. These things can happen very fast. Tony Seba points out, if you look down Fifth Avenue in 1900 in New York at the Easter Parade, you have to look hard to find the first car, but 13 years later, you have to look even harder to find the last horse. Henry Ford won over the buggy makers. The pace of transformation is set not by incumbents, but by insurgents, who are not encumbered or inhibited by incumbents' business models, culture, legacy assets. And in fact, investors flee before customers do. Capital markets keenly sniff out disruption, and if they think you're in the toaster or headed for the toaster, they don't wait for the toast to get done before they take their money out and put it into the new thing. As Jack Welch said, if the rate of change on the outside is greater than the rate of change on the inside, The end is near. This is a formidable leadership challenge for existing energy companies. So to sum up, our energy future is not fate, but choice. That choice is extremely flexible. In 1975, the US government and industry all said that the energy needed to make $1 of real GDP could never go down. A year later, I heretically suggested it could drop by 67% in 50 years. So far, it's dropped by 54% in the first 39 years. But now we have much more powerful technologies, integrative design, enlightened regulation, maturing financing and marketing and delivery channels. So now we see how to save another threefold, twice what I originally thought, at 1/3 the real cost. And that's just with the innovation that's already happened, not what is likely in the future. To solve the energy problem, we just needed to enlarge it and integrate it. And the results may at first seem incredible, but as Marshall McLuhan said, only puny, small, weak secrets need protection. Big discoveries, he said, are protected by public incredulity. Now, there's still a lot of old thinking around, too. As the former oilman Maurice Strong said, not all the fossils are in the fuel. But we are seeing extraordinarily rapid change. The U.S. is actually on the reinventing fire trajectory since 2010. And in a few weeks, our colleagues and we will publish in China an extremely detailed analysis, writing a roadmap for the energy revolution that the Chinese leadership has called for, and showing that China can do even more than I have described for the United States in switching to efficiency and renewables. So it's a very exciting time, especially in countries like France that are just at the early stages of thinking through a fundamental energy transformation. So with that, I wish you many thanks, bonne chance, of course, and let's see if we have any time for a little conversation. Thank you.
Rachel, we have time for questions. Yes, okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Amory. I'm over the phone. Est-ce que des gens ont une question pour Monsieur Lovins ou pas? Et je la traduirai directement au téléphone. OK, une seconde. Just a second, monsieur. Elle est en français, votre question, ou en anglais? English? Very good. Do it over the phone directly with the microphone.
Professor Lovins, it's Dr. Shmelev from Oxford Environment Europe. You have given us an amazing lecture on renewables and new energy choices. And in your lecture, you mentioned one particular instrument, the rapid transit system with buses, and showed us the slide. I've just returned from Colombia, from a city of Bogota, where such a rapid transit system has been implemented, but it didn't have a significant effect. Would you say that it's necessary to apply these instruments with, in conjunction with, let's say, taxing alternatives, cutting, avoidance routes, and providing additional opportunities or incentives? Thank you.
Well, in Bogota, I actually know the former mayor who implemented that system, and I know there were some issues with whether the policy mixed use was the right one. I can tell you it's in use in, I believe, nearly 200 cities worldwide, and in most of them it works extremely well, but each of them will have a different policy and cultural and geographic situation. So each of them will need a different mix of policies, which may include fiscal instruments or not. No city is exactly like another, and you need to tailor the solution, of course, exactly to the local conditions. But on the whole, the experience with bus rapid transit has been extremely positive.
Okay. Une autre question, quelqu'un? Où ça? Je vois. Ah, just a second.
Thank you, Monsieur Lovins, for your very efficient way. But I would like to ask you, for alternative energy, you took into consideration the biofuel and the hydrogen, right? So do you think...
Yes.
Yeah, do you think that we have to choose alternative energy that don't harm our environment, and to keep the food, the land, and to plant for our nutrition, and not to take from the water the hydrogen? So to keep our water and our food, and then we look at the wind powers and sun powers and these stuffs. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, two different questions. One about biofuels, and I would remind you in the American case where we are much more car crazy than you are in France, and we have designed our cities around cars, not people, so it will take time to fix them. Even with all of our huge road transport and an assumed great increase in it shown in the subtitle of this slide, we would still need so little biofuel that 2/3 of it could be made from existing waste streams that we are paying to throw away, and all of it could be made without harming soil, without harming climate, and indeed we would pay farmers and ranchers to take carbon out of the air and put it back in the topsoil where it belongs and where it used to be. There are many different ways to do this, but I would not advocate any approach to biofuels that uses food crops. And fortunately, we don't need to displace any cropland for the small amount of biofuels that we may need. And the reason I say may need is that we could actually run everything on hydrogen, including airplanes with liquid hydrogen. This is called cryoplanes, that we could otherwise run with advanced biofuels. The water issue you mentioned is not a real one for hydrogen. I won't go into it here, but if you go to rmi.org, the website of Rocky Mountain Institute, this is one of 20 issues treated in detail in this 2003 and still valid white paper, and it's called 20 Hydrogen Myths, MYTHS. So 20 hydrogen myths at rmi.org will, I think, deal adequately with your concern about the interplay between hydrogen and water. Thank you.
Thank you. Quelqu'un a une question? Oui. There's another question. Hold on. In English?
In English. Xavier Edelman from the World Resources Forum. Thank you, Amory, for your inspiring talk. Could you comment on the shale gas and oil hype in the US?
Yes. As a member of the National Petroleum Council, I've followed the shale gas story with special interest. In fact, the business was invented by my old friend, the late George Mitchell, who was a great innovator, and with the help of a great deal of government subsidy. Shale gas is, and actually shale oil, which in certain places is a far more valuable byproduct, has been quite disruptive to the conventional energy markets. But let me mention a few things about it. The gas price continues to be volatile, unpredictable, and the bigger and cheaper the shale gas production becomes, the more volatile the gas price becomes downstream. If you are going to compare the price of shale gas with the price of efficiency and renewables, which have no fuel and therefore no fuel price volatility, then to make the comparison fair, you must add the market value of the price volatility, which you can determine from the options market. It's about $2 or $3 per gigajoule. And this actually means that the actual risk-adjusted cost to the customer is not so attractive. Also, you will get a price that is more like $6 or $8 per gigajoule, which is what the futures market tells us for 10 years from now. You can buy that gas today. You don't need to argue about a forecast. And this is quite reasonable because there are 8 major categories of risk and uncertainty around fracking that will take perhaps a decade to resolve. And perhaps all of them will be fully and satisfactorily resolved, and then we will have more and cheaper long-run gas than we thought, and optionality is good. But 8 is a rather large number, so I would not bet a lot of money that all of these will come out right. And we're finding, therefore, that the real story we learned from fracking about abundant and affordable energy for the long haul is not so much about gas, but about its benign, carbon-free physical hedges, namely efficiency and renewables, which are both outcompeting it and outpacing it. It's a very different future than we might suppose. So I think, although the shale gas is interesting, it's something of a distraction from the durable long-run solutions. And I think if I were French, I would probably feel, as some of you may, that the ban on fracking in France was a good idea and will help us focus on the transition to efficiency and renewables.